pledge. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you all for being here today. Maybe we'll start with the self-introductions. I'm Kevin Breitsky, Porter County Surveyor, Chairman for this committee.
Tom Vanderwood with NERC.
Stephen Hughes, NERC. Mark Waddell, Tom Chesterton.
Kelly Wenger, Nikki.
Martin Bobchick, Porter County.
Dean Button, Hammond.
Bob Thompson, Valparaiso Transit.
Max Raylander, Valparaiso.
Kay Nelson, Northwest Indiana Forum, and this will be my probably second to last meeting because I'm retiring at the end of May.
Michelle.
Say it ain't so.
What?
Say it ain't so.
Sorry.
It is. Huh?
It's so.
Yeah, and then Michelle Murday, Pariso, Northwest Indiana Forum, and Kay and Tran. Meredith Stillwell, NERC staff.
Carl Lissick, Drive Clean Indiana.
Erin Canis, Tigers on Council.
Scott Burrow, First Group Engineering.
Jake Amaral, Butler Fairman and Cypher.
Greg Dolgowski, Compline.
Charles Bradsky, NERC staff. Steve Kazaki, Seoga Group.
Scott Weber, NERC staff.
Emmanuel Rahul, NERC staff. Grace Bender, NERC staff.
Sean Todd, NERC staff.
Mitch Barloda, NERC staff.
Thank you. Thank you all. The minutes of the March 3rd, 2026 meeting were sent out. Are there any additions, corrections, comments? If not, can I have a motion?
Move to approve.
Second.
Yeah, first by Dean, second by Bob Thompson. Any other comment? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Anyone against? So moved. Do we have public comment today? If anybody wants to make public comment, speak now. If not, we'll move on. Thank you. Planning, Resolution 3607, adopting the fiscal year 2027-2028 Unified Planning Work Program. And Vanderwood will start us off. And this will be a team effort.
Thank you. Just one clarification. It's Resolution 26-07.
Oh,
Thank you. So I'm going to discuss the draft Unified Planning Work Program for fiscal years 2027 and 2028. This is known here as the UPWP. This is a core planning document which is required by the US DOT, and it serves a few functions. First, it's our work plan for the 2 fiscal years. It is our program of planning tasks. So it covers our state fiscal year, which is from July to June. This will cover July 2026 through June 2028. It's designed to essentially, it's one of the 2 ways that we implement our long-range plan. There is our Short-Range Transportation Improvement Program, which is the program of federal funding for actual transportation projects. And then there is our work program, which funds all of our staff activities, the planning and the administration of those funds. In addition to our own regional priorities, it also addresses the priorities of our federal funding agencies, so the Federal Highway Administration and the Federal Transit Administration. And here in Indiana, we adopt a 2-year UPWP every 2 years. And in the intervening year, we adopt a 1-year update. So this is the 2-year document, and we will have a 1-year update a year from now. Generally speaking, our UPWP stays pretty much the same from year to year. The reason is it funds the work that we do on a regular basis, such as development of a MILFA, administration of the TIP, bike and ped planning, transit planning, and all of sort of the administrative work that we do with committees and so on. And so we don't really make major changes generally from year to year. But what we do is we usually update the budgets for each year. So each task in our program has a budget, and that is based on an estimate of how many staff hours and consultant contracts we'll have that relate to that particular task. So for the first year of this UPWP, we have our actual funding, available funding. But for the second year, we're using an estimate. So FY27, in this document, you'll see those numbers are fairly well set. They can be adjusted between tasks, but the overall total for the program is going to be basically set in stone. But for FY28, we're just estimating that our funding will be the same from FY27. Usually it changes a little bit year to year. And then again, as I said, our kind of recurring tasks, those timelines get adjusted a little bit based on what we've done already and what we expect to be completed in the coming years. I will say that in contrast to recent years, there are no federal planning emphasis areas, or PEAs, included in this document, and that's because none have been issued by the US DOT. They've sort of been a little bit shy about making policy at the administrative level, and they've been trying to adhere to the sort of the executive level priorities. And then the main, I guess, change that we have in this document is that the FY27 program year is focused across pretty much every task on the development of the 2050 MTP update. And then FY28 is focused on the implementation of that plan, which is illustrated in this chart here. Okay, so the UPWP is broken down into a few different sections based on the planning tasks that are outlined by INDOT every year. So they are shown here on the slides. You can see that we have a budget associated with each one of those tasks. And in this document, we have carryover funding from previous fiscal years. So just to kind of describe what's in this chart, which I don't expect you to necessarily read this slide, but there is the full document was emailed out as part of the agenda packet. It's not reproduced here because it would just consume too many resources to print the entire document. But you'll see that this is the task group name, 100 through 600. Right? And then these are the tasks that are funded through our planning funds, which is called PL funding, and the 5303 transit planning grant. We've received that from INDOT as what they call a consolidated grant. And then each column here has the funding that we've dedicated to each task. These first three columns are FY25 carryover funds. The next three are FY26 carryover funds. Then that's followed by FY27 available funds, and then our estimated FY28 funds. The line items that are highlighted in blue are those tasks which are funded through that consolidated planning grant. This is our main source of funding for our work. In FY27, we're receiving about $2 million in federal funding. This is shown on the chart here, our total. I'm sorry, this is shown here. Now this column also includes some other funding sources, which I'll describe in a later slide, but that's the primary funding source. In FY27, we did see a decrease in overall federal funding through the Consolidated Planning Grant, and that's due to two reasons. The first is there was an estimate at INDOT that we would have some funding, but it turns out we got kind of less funding overall available to all the NPOs to the region, or I'm sorry, in the state. And then secondly, a few years ago, the formula that determines how those funds are distributed amongst the Indiana MPOs was changed to basically give Indianapolis more funding. Historically, they had received a disproportionately low share of funding because they were having issues spending that money. But a few years ago when they restructured, they asked that that formula be changed, and we did our best to make it a formula that worked for us as well, but it did result in us seeing a decrease. So we do anticipate that in the coming years we will kind of level off. I don't think that we'll be seeing a decrease going forward, but that is just something to be aware of. Then in addition to that consolidated planning grant, we also have available to us what we call flex funds, which are funds that we can transfer from the TIP, the Transportation Improvement Program, into our work program. And we have to specifically identify what we're going to spend that funding on. This is something that's been discussed at this committee and through the NOFA process. This year, similar to previous years, we are transferring in or flexing in CMAQ funding, congestion mitigation, air quality funding. That's for air quality public education. HSIP, Highway Safety Improvement Program funding for road safety audits, and the Surface Transportation Block Grant, or STBG funding, to fund the RTIP, E-TIP platform that we use to manage the Transportation Improvement Program. In addition to those kind of core tasks that we described in previous slides, we also are required to set aside 2.5% of our overall consolidated planning grant to be used on complete streets activities. So for FY27, that equates to approximately $50,000. And we are basically just using that to fund existing activities that it's not additional funding, it's just funding that we have to allocate towards what they call complete streets planning. So that's just going to fund the work that we're already doing in terms of bike and pedestrian planning. And then in addition to that, we have a few special projects that have been identified in the UPWP, and these are the same as previous years. So again, there's no real difference here, but we'll continue to fund our work with the Marquette Greenway using READY grant funds, which we received through the READY grant administered by the Northwest Indian Forum, to match the federal funding that we use to administer and implement our federal RAISE grant to complete certain portions of the Marquette Greenway. As I mentioned, we're flexing in HSIP funds for road safety audits again to continue that program. One difference I'll note is that rather than have $77,500 on an annual basis, we've shifted the 28 funding into FY27 so that we have the 2 years worth of funding in a single year. And the reason for that is that we cannot sign a contract for 2 years until we have a purchase order for that funding. So by shifting it into a single year, we can in FY27 sign a 2-year contract to complete road safety audits, and then in FY28 we don't need to flex any funding. So we're planning on going forward, that's the way that we'll do it, every 2 years. And then lastly, we have funding again set aside for LPA planning assistance. This is for partnering with local governments to complete local planning projects. This is a project that was included in previous UPWPs, but because of certain internal issues and inability to get the project moving forward, we have pushed that out to another year. So we continue to allocate a little bit more than $300,000 for that program. So our intent is that we will get that moving and moving forward in FY27. And that'll include sort of a call for projects and some, and that's kind of described there, but that'll be a partnership with local governments. And that's the UPWP. As Commissioner Brzezinski noted, we do have in your packet Resolution 26-07, approving a recommendation to the full commission / executive board to adopt this FY 27-28 UPWP, and we would ask for a vote to recommend.
Do we have any questions for Tom?
I don't have a question, I was gonna make a motion to
Please do.
affirm the UPWP document for commission, full commission review.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you. Second for discussion from Dean. Is there any other discussion? If not, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Anyone against? Very good, seeing none. So approved. That's right.
Thank you.
So we'll move on.
Okay, so the next item on the agenda is the 2027 Metropolitan Transportation Plan update, and we have a presentation on some of the work that's been accomplished this year so far. I presented some of this information on kind of our work plan for this project in, I believe it was February. So we're just going to kind of provide an update on where we are as far as the first phase, which is the kind of data collection existing conditions component. So by way of background, we are required to update our long-range metropolitan transportation plan, which is required every 4 years. So our current plan is NWI 2050 plus. It was a pretty significant effort to develop that plan, and so this update that we're embarking on now is sort of what I've been calling a light update. And the reason I say that is because the intent is to kind of carry over the vision and major goals of NWI 2050 plus. We won't be extending the horizon year past 2050, and we'll be maintaining the overall organization of the document, which is related to the chapters of active transportation, land use and housing, environment, freight, highways, and transit. And so really what we're going to be focused on is updating all of our data and looking at how we can, what are some specific implementation actions that we can work on in developing our work program for FY28. As a reminder, the project timeline that we're working on, and I've kept it draft because we're still firming up our public engagement meetings. We are coming to the end of Q1, and we are finalizing the regional profile and performance report. That's what you're going to hear about today. You'll hear about two of the components of that report, and then in May, so our next meeting, we'll have a few more of those to present to you. And then the idea is that all the data that we collect and format for presentation will be reviewed primarily during this second phase of the project, which is assessment and analysis. We'll be taking that data out and reviewing it with stakeholder groups and the public and getting feedback on what the priority initiatives are that we should focus on going forward before the next plan. So having said that, I'm going to hand it over to Grace, who's going to present on demographics, some of the demographic data that we've collected.
Hi everyone. So as Tom kind of stated, one of the first steps in developing this regional profile involves the collection of data that's relevant to the MTP update. So data has currently been organized, summarized, and visualized through the development of maps and charts. And the demographics data serves as kind of the foundation of the update.
And if I can just say one other thing, if there's anything you see, this is intended to be kind of a discussion, so if there's anything you see that looks interesting or you have questions about while we go through this, please feel free to raise your hand or shout out and interrupt.
So to start, we'll look at the population pyramids for Lake Porter and LaPorte counties. And these pyramids kind of show an age distribution for the county and then split into male and female populations. So this data was derived from the 2024 American Community Survey 5-year estimates, and so takes into account the last 5 years, so 2020 to 2024 years to develop that estimate. Overall, these pyramids, the shape, show an aging population. So looking at the demographic transition model, this shows population dynamics over time. And again, looking at that pyramid structure, our area is in stage 5 or contracting. This is typical. This typically shows in trends of low birth rate, fewer children, as well as low death rates. And so this is a population pyramid similar to the NERC region, broken down by age as well as employment status. And so aging populations, similar to ours, are commonly characterized as having a high dependency ratio, which means there are fewer working age people to support the growing number of older adults. And this is due to a healthier older population with longer life expectancy due to updates in modern healthcare as well as living condition improvements. So here we have the population density for the NERC region for 2024, again using the American Community Survey 5-year estimates. So this shows the spatial distribution of people across our region, with the darker shades showing the higher density areas. And so the population was broken down into standardized categories, including rural, low density, mid density, urban, as well as our urban core. So as you'll see, a lot of these smaller block groups tend to have the highest population per square mile, and that's because the census draws block groups based on population and attempts to have between 600 to 3,000 people per block group, with 1,500 being the optimal size. So, you know, the smaller are going to have more population for less area. And so looking at population change by cities and towns as well as census designated places, you can see that the main increases are the cities along the urban edge, while the urban core, especially in northern Lake County, maintained or decreased population. Specifically, rural centers also, some dramatically declined, while others dramatically increased to the point of being designated as a new census designated place. So this is a chart showing the raw estimate changes, so the total number of people that changed from 2014 to 2024. So the 2014 value is in blue and is the lower line, and then the 2024 population is the orange line, which is the top line. So looking at, again, just total population estimates, the top 3 total population gains include St. John, Crown Point, and Cedar Lake, while areas with the most, again, total population loss are Gary, East Chicago, and Hammond. However, if we look at the change in population from 2014 to 2024 within each area, it kind of changes a bit, showing locations with the greatest increase being Hannah, Winfield, and St. John, where the locations with the greatest decrease in population are Shelby, Rolling Prairie, and Kingsbury. Again, there were 11 areas that have been census designated places since 2014. And so the ones that had the largest population density include Westboro, Ross, and Lake Eliza. And so these unincorporated, so census designated places are specifically unincorporated areas that are locally recognized and have some population or housing units and are statistically equivalent to incorporated places in terms of the mix of residential, non-residential, and commercial uses. So moving on, looking at employment density, this shows the distribution of and concentration of employment across the region. Darker colors, again, represent higher employment densities, and these trends tend to mirror population density, and this is because the way that the survey is conducted, responses are tied to the person's residency and not necessarily their place of business. So if you compare between employment density and population density, these are some areas that just show similarities and discrepancies. So the areas that are in red are areas that are similar to the population density, while the areas that are circled in blue are areas that are dissimilar. And so the areas that are consistent with population density tend to have a high ratio of the population that's employed, whereas the blue, the dissimilar areas, has a lower working population. And the most similar areas tend to be in that urban center and in rural centers, where the most discrepancies are in areas that are just outside the urban area, especially along major corridors, especially 109th Broadway, and then you can kind of see along Johnson Road and 35 in LaPorte County, between Michigan City and LaPorte. So, looking at employment density based on major employment centers, the areas that are in orange show the high concentrations of employers based on the number of people they employ, or weighted by the number of people they employ. And so we were able to develop this using data axle data that was provided to us by INDOT. And overall, this shows that most employed people live within half a mile to 3 miles away from some sort of major employment center. And so these are the major employment centers over time. The areas in brown are from NERC's 2040 plan, and were identified as major employment centers when that plan was completed. And then the heat map. Yes.
A few years ago, I think Tom had just started back here. We noticed a discrepancy where some of the major employers weren't showing up on the map, and I think it was during the coffee projects, where we were seeing that, I mean, some of the larger employers, like, I'm not sure, I think IUN, Methodist Hospital, maybe some of the mills, weren't showing up on employment data. Has that been specifically looked at and corrected? I know it went to a point where they actually removed the map from the set of documents for projects.
Yeah, so this is based on data that we received from the state. However, we haven't necessarily gone through a verification process with the census's like industry clusters that might show more specifically specific types of employment centers, such as medical or industrial. So yeah, we can definitely look into that as we move further into the process.
And to build on that, a couple of your slides have Indiana Harbor, which is home to a few manufacturers, color-coded as rural. And perhaps you might want to give them their own color.
Can we go back?
Go back a few slides.
I actually think U.S. Steel also.
Yeah, all those yellow hearts
yeah.
along the lakefront.
Yeah, they're rural just because there's low residency in those areas. Not a lot of people live there, but
I
yes,
get that,
I
but they're not
understand.
defined as
I
rural,
understand.
so perhaps unless you're limited to your categories.
No, not at all. But I understand going back and making sure that those are
It's a terminology.
correctly identified. I understand. Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, so again, the new major employment centers that we digitized were based on the data we got from INDOT, which is individual business data, and then we weighted that based on number of businesses as well as the number of people employed. So it's possible that if it's one employer that has a lot of people employed but not a lot of other employers around, that it might not show up the way that we went through this process.
Iman has got a.
No, I'm just, in this map, it's showing actually ION as a major employment center. I see that,
Yeah.
like right south of 1894.
Yeah.
So-
I might specifically answer my question right there.
Which is, this is the ION area.
But the color codes indicate that the manufacturers are a minor employment area, unless my eyeballs aren't working right, which is a possibility.
Would that be due to the mills having a greater number of contractors?
I still think their employment is in the thousands. I mean, collectively, Indiana Harbor, East and West, and BP, Safety Clean, US Gypsum, I mean, they could just be a giant dot instead of multiple little dots. But I think to accurately reflect that regional area, it's a major manufacturing employment hub. And if you threw on the contractors, Charles, I think it would even be a bigger blob.
But those contractors may have offices in, say, Maryville.
True. I'm just going based on what I would assume the employment numbers are, the direct employment, not the contractors.
So and I would also add that the color codes for on the bottom of the legend, the yellow, light green, and dark green, those are based on the color codes from a heat map that we created for employment for the last plan update. And that, I believe, was based on, it was a heat map, so it was based on the location of like a single dot and then like an extrapolation in GIS using analytical tools around that. So like, for example, like a huge land parcel that might have gotten coded as just all of its employment in one side of that parcel. So then like, that would not reflect on the whole parcel as being a dark color or something. So it could just be idiosyncrasies with the way this is coded.
Yeah, I think there's probably an explanation in the analysis for why this looks like this. And I think it is, as Scott said, a question of density, job density. And when you have, for example, Maryville, which has a lot of office buildings which employ a greater density of workers. Same thing with like sort of the medical corridor along Calumet Avenue in Munster, and some of the other office areas, like even in Hammond and Valparaiso, Port Michigan City. That's a greater density of workers, but I take your point that maybe there's another way that we can represent some of this to show more accurately that even though there's, maybe the jobs are kind of spread out on a larger parcel, they are still, there's still a high number of jobs in the area. So that's something that we can look at. So thank you for those comments.
Thank you.
Right, and I believe our SEDS goes into that a bit more and looks at specific industry clusters as well as, you know, revenue generated, which again would obviously be displayed.
You gotta keep in mind that your audience is predominantly people that don't understand GIS and data and things along that line. And if they're a union member and they're working in one of these places, they're like, don't we count? So.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so kind of back looking at population, especially population change in our area. This is a more granular look. Before we were looking at individual places, and now we're looking again at block groups. So here you can see that the the darker colors are again the greatest increase, while the light blue indicates a decrease. So notable areas include of increase include Porter, along the I-65 corridor in Maryville and Crown Point, as well as downtown Whiting and LaPorte. And again, this also shows consistency with our census designated urban areas. And here you can see the difference between 2010 and 2022, where you can see where areas are growing. And so this is the outline of the 2020 urban area, and you can see again that those along the edge are growing, including the Lakes of the Four Seasons area, Westville, East Valpo, and South Lake County. So finally, we'll look at a few economic indicators, the first being median household income. So this is the display of median or middle income level of households while excluding extreme outliers. Again, the urban cores seem to have the lowest median household incomes, indicating higher concentrations of poverty and economic distress. This is a pretty common trend. Most urban centers often have a high percentage of households earning less than 60% the area's median income. And for Northwest Indiana in 2024, that median income was approximately $75,000. So those in the lighter green shades kind of show those that are below the median for the entire region. And so this is the median housing value. It's somewhat similar to the median household income, but median home prices are specific to areas where housing demand is usually rising, or they're experiencing low economic health, or they're having affordable housing problems. And so with that, we will transition to land use and housing number 2.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
So moving to another element of the MTP update, that's land use and housing. And what we're doing here with most of the elements, which we have multiple elements. So today we are focusing on the background and demographics and land use and housing, but we have other elements in more detail in transportation, freight, transit, trails, and environment that will be presented in other meetings. So in this one, before I start the presentation, I wanted just to give a background that like how we are doing the regional profile. We have performance measures that was actually came out of the NWI 2015, and also some others came from the NWI 2050 plus. And before the update, we thought like we wanted to check our performance measures. We wanted to see where we are, and we wanted to see if we really need some improvements. Are we doing well? Are we having like some negative impact in the last 10 years? And that's what we started doing element by element. So the first one here is land cover, developed area, and we were able to get information in the last 10 years between 2014 and 2024. And that's to track developed land. If the development happening within the urban area or in rural area, unincorporated area, and using agricultural lands and open spaces. So by looking at this information, of course, the legends here showing in more details, but like it was combined, the developed land, we have like developed open space, which is basically maintained land, managed vegetation, lawn, golf courses, and cemeteries. And this is as long as it's maintained, considered developed open space. And also looking at the developed low density and medium density and high density. So we combined all of that as one item as developed. Open water, the same, like we have multiple items under open water collected all in one category. So as we're looking here, we lost about 3% of our agricultural land. And in another slides coming later, we're going to explain where is agricultural land actually went. We gain actually more open space. We gain more rock and sand and clay area. Developed land increased by about 5%. We lost some of the open water, which is lake ponds and other, and it could be converted into wetland or emergent grass area or some other use, but we lost about 3%. So this is like the developed land cover since 2014, and it's showing here the actual where the developed land went. So the 2014 is a dark gray one. And then we have the 2020 developed land, the red color, and then the green one that was came from the 2024 land cover map. So the green and red, it's mostly in the.
Yes.
What?
The middle button.
Oh, this one, yeah. So we can see that in the last 5 years, most of the development happening around communities, like we have Valparaiso, we have Winfield, Crown Point, St. John, Cedar Lake, and some area here between LaPorte, city of LaPorte, and Michigan City. So that's showing where is the development happening, which we developed about 13,000 acres, which is equal to 20 square mile. If we divided 13,000 by 640, which is a square mile, give us about 20 square mile that we developed in the last 10 years. We don't have much happened the last 10 years in unincorporated area. We still have some, but it's not as significant. It's mostly around communities, which is great news. So the next one here is looked also. The performance measure here is to look at the population increases towards the Northwest Indiana 2050 plus goal. We came up with by the end of the plan with the recommendations that like we really wanted our region to grow about 0.55% every year. And that's why we looked at the last 5 years and showing here the changes, which is not as we are hoping to, but like hopefully in the next years will be much better. But we did very well in 2024, which is almost 0.5% in meeting the goals, and in 2025, 0.3%. we had actually very low, or maybe we lost some population in 2023. So the reason we're doing that, because we wanted, with the regional profile, we're just looking at the status, the current status now, and where we are. Do we need to add more strategies? Do we need to have like some sort of additional goals? That's why we're doing the regional profile. We looked at housing changes too, so we were able to get the housing changes in the last 10 years. And here showing most of the increase happened in Porter County, which was almost 6% increase, Lake County 3%, LaPorte County 2%. So overall, the region, the housing grew by almost 3% in the last 10 years. But the goal is to have 4% increase every year. And that's the recommendations came from NWI 2050 plus. So, and that we have, I'm gonna show later some additional slides which is showing we really have shortage in housing. So that, and we also have vacancy. That's why I'm showing here the map on the right, which we have significant vacancy. As you see, we have the most vacancy in LaPorte County, which is about 13%, Lake County 10%, and Porter County has 6%, which is lowest than the lowest county has vacancy, which is still reasonable. 6% is a good number. It's not like something significant issue. Overall, the region has vacancy almost 10%.
Right here, next.
Oh, you have a question?
So, how long is the 4% yearly growth rate a goal for?
2050.
So one of the things that Ray showed was that our population is decreasing. So at some point in time, wouldn't that 4% want to trend to zero?
It should be. It depends on how the communities implement, and the housing, the employment, how to attract more people to their communities, and that's what we are trying to.
Okay. So, and I think the housing growth rate is tied to the targeted population growth rate, which was shown on the previous slide. So we have sort of a trend that we're looking at, but we also had in 2050 plus a kind of a scenario-based set of projections. They weren't really projections so much as targets, and they were kind of based on a land use framework that envisioned increased population density around TOD areas, continued moderate growth in suburban areas, the stabilization and hopefully some slight growth in some of those urban areas which have seen declining population. So it's based on, those targets are based on not necessarily straight line projections, but they're based on kind of an understanding of how the region could develop and how we sort of like it to develop.
Okay, thank you.
So if you look at the vacancy map, we see the darker color here, which is mostly in the around downtown area in some communities, and also within the urban core communities, East Chicago, Hammond, Whiting, Michigan City. So that's where we see most of the vacancy. One of the performance measures also to track the loss of agricultural land and open space within the region. We looked at the last 10 years, so we lost some open space and natural area, and also loss of agricultural land. So the reason we look into that is to explore suburbanizations and non-farm development in agricultural area. So we wanted to limit that. That's why we're checking on this data. We wanted also to assess if open space and forest land have decreased, and that's something we are not encouraging. the impact of, cutting trees and utilizing forested land for development. And the reason we look into that also because it's impacting the wildlife and habitat. And of course, influences drainage and soil erosion patterns. The next one, we have like about 15 performance measures, but like we're very much working with about 12 performance measures now for the profile. The other 3, they need like more in-depth analysis, so we'll be in the second phase of the MTP update. So usually we look at main centers because the denser the downtown area and community centers. By the way, the main centers map, this is a map that you are utilizing for the NOFA. We have one of the criteria, if like the project in proximity to within like a main centers. So that's what we're checking, and mostly downtown area and major community centers or major neighborhoods, if these are the main centers. So when we looked at the map here, or the numbers, we found out that Winfield is the highest. So the area which consider like a downtown Winfield, the Randolph and the 109 intersection. So this is the area of like about 1 block of Winfield, and that was the highest population changes. And then comes the Miller area, Lake Station, downtown Crown Point, the Monaster, which is Ridge and Calumet, also the main center of Monaster, South LaPorte, around Valparaiso University District. So we have some, I have the top down, but I don't have every communities because it comes to very, very tiny, so it means either they lost population or, and you see that in the curve, the green curve, the one is going down, it means that they lost population in main centers or community centers. So that's another thing that we're looking to look at, what if we need to have some policy or strategies to recommend it for the communities here in Northwest Indiana. We looked also at the employment changes in the main centers, and that's of course, like the employment or employers or employees, they will enjoy easier access to the workplaces if you are in the main centers and surrounded by amenities within these main centers. The top one was South Hammond. They got more employment in this area. Winfield is still also, it's one of the highest. Miller, Valparaiso University District. It's very much like with the population increase, most of them also, they got more employment within these main centers. And we see again, like some communities, they lost employment within their downtown or their community centers. The next performance measures here, which is the income-based housing cost, and what we're doing here is the housing price to income ratio. That's what we use as a measure to measure affordability within the area, and that's what we're looking for. Who's paying over 30% of the household income on housing? And if they are paying more than 30%, that means it's burden. And that's, I'm gonna show the shortage in the housing with a specific income. Either lower income or higher income, we're still looking at that. So in the state of Indiana, the people paying mortgage is about 26.5% paying over 30% of the household income. And the one in the bottom here showing, the first table showing within Northwest Indiana, the Lake County, Porter County, and LaPorte County, which is very similar between 21 and 22. These are percentages that paying over 30% within the county for their mortgage. However, like the low income household area, they pay, which is about 50% of the lower income household paying over 30%, which is significant number, and mostly in rent. So the rent, actually what they are paying for rent is too high. Lake County, they pay for rent over 50% of their income for rent. Porter County, very similar. LaPorte County is the lowest, which is they pay over 45% of their income for rent. And we have a lack of multifamily development within the Northwest Indiana in general, and specifically for rent, and that's make it like they don't have enough demand, enough supply for the demand that they should be.
What's the source of your information for the rent?
The census data.
This, the latest census?
Yeah, they have like detailed information about the rent and the mortgage.
Isn't it 51% of Lake County residents pay more than 30% of their income as
The renters.
right?
That's the, yeah. The people
51% pay more than 30% of
Yes.
their income. Not, they don't pay 51% of their income as
No.
rent.
No, 51% of the total renters paying over 30%.
Yeah, that makes sense.
This one also, the performance measure is just to track housing stock versus demand, which is affordability-based prices. We had this information, but it was based on 2020 census data. Now we have the estimate, so we were able to look at the 2024, the supply and demand of our area here within. I looked at the county level, but like in the last NWI 2050 plus, we looked for all the communities that has population over 10,000, which was about like 20-something community. So in this one, we just look at the household numbers, and we look at the housing available within a specific range that meet the income, which we have. We're starting from less than 25,000 all the way to household making over 200,000. And if you look at down here, like for example, like the household that they are making between 100,000 and 200,000, they are lacking by 15,000, over 15,000 units. The same for the people making 200,000. And then comes here, I'm talking about Porter County. And for the people making less than 25,000, we're lacking this number. What's happening that these people with this income, if they don't have houses available within their range, they go get the cheaper one, and then they make issue for the people making less income. And that's how we look at it, you know, the need for each county. Overall, we are short to buy over 25,000 units, and that's based on income. So we have plenty of houses that for the people making between 100,000 all the way to 75,000 to 200,000. So we have plenty of housing, but we are lacking for low income and lacking for high income. So we looked into that for the 3-county area, and that's also another strategies. We're gonna look at it and make recommendations. We're lacking, actually we have 85% of the single family homes within the region here, 85% single family homes. So we are lacking the middle housing development, which is the 2 units all the way to over 5 units and up, like apartment buildings. So we looked at the housing, the middle housing, the permits. So we see some communities here, they are building a lot of middle housing, like Maryville, LaPorte, Hammond, Whiting, East Chicago, Gary, Schererville. These communities did very well in the last 20 years by building like the middle housing. But we have some communities either they don't build at all or they have very low middle housing. Here's the permits. We having in this one, the middle housing for Porter County was very high. And also between 2013 and 2023, Lake County and LaPorte is the lowest with the total permits for middle housing. And that's what we are going to make our recommendations for the MTP update. That's it.
Any questions for Ilan?
All this is gonna be online a little bit, right?
We are going actually to have like a website for the MTP update, and right?
Yeah, so this is kind of a piece of the data that we're collecting. Like Iman said, there's going to be performance measures related to each one of the elements of the plan. And that's all going to be consolidated into a single document, which will be posted on the website. At this point, because part of the reason why we're bringing this out to the committee before we bring it to the public at a public meeting, although this meeting is public, is to get some of this feedback that you guys have provided to us today. So we can distribute this slideshow if you'd like, but I mean, I think that there's some things that we heard today that we'd like to look into before we kind of publish it as a document.
I think it would be helpful if you have a better definition of affordable housing. There's a lot of discussion whether it's affordable, attainable, and what those parameters are, because we need more clarity for
people live, but it's the income-based affordable housing. So
well, put it in the definition, please.
Yeah. So I have it actually in my slides, but like, you're right. People think affordable housing is just for low income, but actually income-based housing affordability, that's the right term. Because like some people actually with the higher income, they don't have enough supply, and that's another issue. So we've been taking like
Just remove the.
cheaper,
Just remove the word affordability and make it attainable.
attainable.
Attainable covers all levels.
And that's what we're trying to service the whole population, to be considerate of anybody that's looking for a house, but also sensitive to how much they can really spend. Dean had a question.
Yeah, if you looked at generational transformative projects like a certain NFL franchise wanting to move to Northwest Indiana,
Always back to that.
the impact on these statistics because of that.
So not really, because these are looking backwards, but there will be a phase of the MTP where we do our projections. And at that point, we'll be meeting with local governments to talk about their planning and what they anticipate, where they see population growing over the next 20 or so years. So that would be a good time to incorporate that into our socioeconomic forecast.
Awesome.
And regardless of whatever industry or commercial enterprise, we should be looking forward to kind of capturing the essence to make us better planners.
And do you know when they're going to make that announcement?
Well, the newspaper says spring or summer.
Okay, so that would be a good time.
Yeah.
Good luck.
Any other questions?
I just want to continue the conversation on Bob's suggestion of attainable versus affordable. And trust me, I've had many conversations within our office on the perception of misinterpretation of affordable. And I'm not sure attainable is an easier way to describe it. I think if we were to copy what Ilan just said about affordable based on income-based affordability, that I've not heard those three words put together with regards to housing. And I'm not a planner, so I'm just throwing it out there, what do you all think about attainability versus income-based affordability? It's kind of like when I went on the mission to rename Burns Ditch Burns Waterway. What terminology do we want to start using on a regular basis so it becomes regionally accepted and understood, and everybody's talking from the same talking points across the communities. That makes sense?
Yeah, and we are in line with the DOT and the HUD and the all housing affordability. So, and that's in their IIJA and all of them, yeah.
Using income-based
so,
affordability?
No,
I mean, makes
income-based,
sense.
that's the one I think with income-based, because people don't get it, you know, they
Yeah.
always think it's for low income, but it's
Yeah.
actually for every income. You have the type of housing prices that meet all the category of incomes or not. So that's why I think income-based affordability, especially if you explain and showing that even, you know, the higher income, they don't have, you know, like the enough supply of the housing. And in one of the maps also, I don't know if I passed this map or not, but like, yeah, in this map here, showing most of the higher income here, you know, like in the middle around US 30. This is a higher income area, and then the light green, you know, like showing the concentration of lower income. So when communities think about, you know, like having new housing or renewal or whatever, they have to look, and I did that for every community. It's a snapshot already under our NIPSI website, under economy and place. So if you look into land use and housing, you will find the snapshot for every community that's showing what you need, what type of housing prices ranges, you know, like that you need to focus on for the future.
I point out too, one of the issues we have in Porter County is particularly in areas around state and federal or national park, that those homes were being torn down at a very swift rate. So we don't anticipate any housing going into those areas, as well as the industrial and manufacturing areas along the north tier. So I think we have to be considerate, and somebody suggested a different color or consideration, because part of me thinks that really shouldn't factor into what we're planning, because that's not going to be part of the future.
We are actually planning to have like a stakeholders group, and like we're gonna have a specific subgroup for the land use and housing, and then I'm gonna invite people to that. So that's what we will hear from people, so we can adjust our data and our future recommendations based on that.
Any other questions or comments for?
Oh, you know I'm going to be annoying here.
That's
So,
okay.
do any of the communities use income-based affordability in their internal discussions yet?
Sure we do, but I'm not the right person to ask, right? I'd have
Fair
to
enough.
Check with Brian Poland on that.
How about Mr. Thompson?
Yes.
You're already using income-based affordability terminology, that term?
It was in the latest study that was done by the council, yes.
Yeah, we did the housing study.
Percent of AMI.
Yeah.
Until she mentioned it, and we've actually had a couple meetings with Iman on all her studies and information, and it's phenomenal. And if you said it during that meeting, I didn't register it till today. And I really like that, because so many people have come back and said, you know, the concern being low income housing and not affordability based on income, you know, falling short in a community.
That's why, it may be newspeak, but Bob and I are both kind of leaning more into attainability.
Okay. I will stay tuned.
Oh, George.
My basic thing is we need to get down to the grassroots on infrastructure such as sanitary sewers, and what are we gonna do with the roads if we're gonna come up with these plans. And it's more than just the developers, it needs to be done on a larger scale, I think. So, just a thought.
On that, I would like to recognize George Topol and David Wright, both came in after we self-introduced. Please put them down for attendance.
And for the record, I was here last month too.
Thank you.
Okay, let's move on to NERC truck parking study. Mr. Weber,
Yes.
this is just for information.
Yes.
today.
Yeah, information only. All right, so yeah, you have to go back to the not as pretty design format for this PowerPoint. Thank you. So this is just an informational item about what's been going on with the Northwest Indiana Regional Truck Parking Study. We'll keep this brief. So just some background of why we're conducting this truck parking study. Well, first of all, the funding came about from the previous UPWP, Unified Planning Work Program, that Tom presented on earlier this meeting. But why are we doing it? Well, conducting a truck parking study was recommended in our last long-range plan, NWI 2050 plus. Sorry, this is kind of crazy. And then also the freight chapter specifically of that plan. And then also INDOT has a statewide multimodal and freight mobility plan in 2023 that they update periodically. In fact, they're working on an update right now for the 2027 adoption for a new statewide freight plan that will focus much more on truck parking. So this is a timely time to be working on a truck parking study for those reasons. And it would be able to connect these kind of documents. So I'll show you the excerpt about where we called for the truck parking study from our NWI 2050 plus plan that was adopted in July of 2023. It literally says verbatim, NERC might consider funding a new truck parking study that inventories existing capacity, identifies parking gaps and needs, and offers pertinent recommendations. And then also from that, I don't know, I keep jumping, truck parking study, it's showing that there were 12% of public truck parking spaces and 88% private for a total of 4,472 spaces. And that was what was inventoried as of that plan. And also from the INDOT statewide freight and mobility plan, you can see that they determined that there's a shortage of truck parking and proposed strategies to address the issue. And in determining these recommended number of truck parking spaces, each property was reviewed for current occupancy rates during peak parking hours, as well as proximity to other private sector truck parking spaces opportunities. So clearly there is kind of a need for studying truck parking at this time. And then also, why is this a good time to be studying truck parking? Well, it's an emphasis in this current administration and also the current Congress. Jason's Law was passed by Congress as Section 1401 of MAP 21 back in 2012. And Jason's Law was named after a truck parker who was tragically killed in South Carolina because of an inadequate supply of truck parking. But this law requires an evaluation of the capability of the state to provide adequate parking and rest facilities for commercial motor vehicles engaged in interstate transportation, assessing the volume of the commercial motor vehicle traffic in the state, and developing a system of measures to measure the adequacy of commercial motor vehicle parking facilities in the state. So you can see that there's an excerpt of the guidance that Federal Highway issued, as well as the state of Indiana's page specifically in that law showing, this is just an excerpt showing the truck vehicle miles traveled, so the volume of truck. So definitely it's timely in terms of the laws that were passed in Congress. And then also in this current administration specifically, in the fiscal year 2026 appropriations bill, there was $200 million set aside specifically for truck parking. That was the first time that any federal appropriations had specifically set aside any funding for truck parking projects. The projects have to be at least $5 million, and at least 30% of those awarded have to be in rural areas. The funds cannot be used for EV charging or refueling activities. And there were no new funding programs created or NOFOs created to implement this $200 million set aside. Instead, the existing grant programs, such as Build Infra and the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration high priority grant programs, were designed to accommodate that $200 million set aside. And then also Executive Order 14286, signed April of last year, was a call to improve the working conditions of America's truck drivers. And Secretary Duffy announced one of the intents of the executive order was to increase the availability of truck parking. So it's definitely more of an emphasis now. And so to that end, last September, NERC formed a steering committee comprised of the Federal Highway Administration, INDOT, Northwest Indiana Forum, Connexus Indiana, Ports of Indiana, Lake County Economic Alliance, Drive Clean Indiana was added later, Odyssey Logistics, and then some of the municipal and county economic development officials, planners, and engineers. For example, from City of Gary, City of Hammond, and Fort County. The first meeting was held in September of last year, and a mission statement was agreed upon at that meeting. A Northwest Indiana regional truck parking study would enhance the regional economy and provide safe harbor to truckers in win-win locations while minimizing adverse impacts on workforce development, roadway safety, noise, environment, public safety, land use conflict, and infrastructure operations and maintenance. And then there was also feedback provided at that steering committee meeting in terms of literature review, a data analysis of existing designated park locations, photos and notes taken at those existing locations, and then plans for the next steps. So the literature review comprised of looking at 5 Metropolitan Planning Organization truck parking studies, 2 State Departments of Transportation studies, and 2 broader organizational truck parking studies. I'm not going to read the whole list, but you can see the ones that we looked at. Some common themes that emerged from looking at those studies included that truck parking is a complex issue involving the availability of spaces, localized industry delivery and staging needs, federal driver regulations, and land use and zoning challenges, among others. It's a systemic problem. Brownfields and underutilized commercial and light industrial sites offer opportunities to expand parking, but community education and trust must be developed as a component. Truckers do care about amenities, usually the minimum access to restroom facilities at designated locations, but the availability and convenience is the most important factor in choosing truck parking locations. And then technology such as TPIMs, which are the Truck Parking Information Management Systems, those are the signs you see that display the number of spaces when you're driving on the interstate. They're actually only of limited utility for drivers because drivers tend to trust more of their own networks and dispatches and other apps that they use. But they still can be useful, but the lesson here is to not maybe overinvest or over-rely on those sites. And then early wins of new designated sites that build good neighbor practices can be critical to achieving more success in the region. And here are the a map of the existing truck parking locations that we've identified. And keep in mind that we've identified a total of about 4,500 spaces. This breaks down to 49 private locations shown in the red dots and 8 public locations shown in the blue triangles. Note that this map does not include fleet or site-specific private designated locations. So, for example, not sites where like it's just a UPS slot or just a FedEx or that other carriers can't use. So, of these, we have 57 locations that are designated locations throughout our region. Here's some just example photos. These are like, we've all seen these probably, but the Love's Travel Stop in Gary on the left, the Gallup's gas station, the truck stop on the near County Line Road in Michigan City, and then the Travel Plaza on the Indian Toll Road in Portage on the top right. And then there are also asset-light businesses. These are businesses that these actually have other uses other than truck parking during the daytime, but they allow truck parking during certain times in a reservation system like Airbnb, where you can reserve these. So these property owners are able to make money off the use of truck parking on their properties, and these are examples of those types of facilities. So here's one in East Chicago on the left, one in Gary in the bottom center, and then one right on State Road 39 near the Michigan border on the top right. And then I also conducted stakeholder interviews with various stakeholders in the last few months. So we specifically were asking stakeholders to review the staff mapped designated truck parking locations to see if they were accurate, areas where there were undesignated parking activity, if any, the adequacy of existing ordinances and regulations to address truck parking in their communities, the areas of imminent development to the extent that was publicly disclosable at the time that was expected to perhaps generate more truck traffic, and then any comments received from those communities from residents or businesses regarding the truck parking issue. And some common themes emerged from those meetings. Meaning residential truck parking was often exacerbated by a lack of workplace truck parking, especially for the smaller independent owner-operators and small firms where they just couldn't park their rig anywhere except for in those residential areas. Underfunded budgets to address truck accelerated pavement deterioration because of trucks cause faster pavement deterioration, and often we don't have the adequate resources to deal with that in our local communities. There's a contagion effect in which when one property starts to allow truck parking, that tends to spread to other nearby properties, especially, for example, on Melton Road and between Miller and the county line here as one example of that. And then poor tax revenue from truck parking versus other competing land uses. So again, this is a challenge because economic development efforts want to focus on the higher and better use for revenue, and oftentimes truck parking is not perceived as that. So, and also as part of the study, we've looked at a data analysis of truck parking data from the 2015 and 2019 Jason's Law survey of designated truck spaces. We've looked at crowdsourced and app data such as Truck Parking Club, Truck Spot, Truck Smart, etc. We've conducted some outreach to private site owners. We've looked at Google Earth and ground truthing some of those data to supplement. And we haven't actually obtained any truck telematics data at NERC, but Connexus Indiana, as part of their effort for the statewide freight plan, has collected some truck telematics data that we've been able to look at least not the raw data, but the locations where those raw data are suggesting that there's truck parking activity. And then we've also, from the undesignated truck parking data, we've again relied a lot on those stakeholder meetings. And then we've also conducted surveys to the truck driving community, which I'll go over those results soon. And then looked at some of the other truck volume and demand data from INDOT's traffic and NERC's traffic counts and some of the land use and freight related employment data that we've already kind of touched on earlier in this meeting. So looking at the truck parking statistics from the survey, first of all, actually the first pie chart is showing that earlier I said there were 88% private. When we looked at the data from the latest round, we actually found it was more like 87% were private spaces and 13% were public, for a total of about 46, almost 47, about 4,700 spaces total. And then in terms of the amenities that were offered at those truck parking spaces, a majority of them had food and beverage, lighting, and restroom access. But as you can see, food and beverage had less than lighting and restroom. Most of the parking spaces did have restroom access. So, and then looking at the results of the survey, 78% reported that they are able to be, are not able to be reimbursed for truck parking costs. And 22% reported that they were able to be reimbursed for truck parking costs if there were any. The reasons for truck parking, the highest reasons were hours of service regulations. At the bottom there you can see it, as well as avoiding traffic congestion at certain times. So like seeing that there's a major metropolitan area with a lot of congestion, a lot of times it's better to go through that area when there's less traffic. Restroom and restroom breaks, refreshment and restroom breaks, and fatigue were the second highest. Inclement weather was third, and then a need to engage in other productivity tasks that required the driver to stop driving, as well as need to stage in order to meet strict loading and unloading delivery times was also not as high as the others. And then looking at ranking the following terms of how important that they were to the drivers, the ability to find available truck parking spaces was the highest. The convenience of the parking site to the route or the destination was second highest. Maneuvering in and out of the spaces was the third highest value. The safety and security of the parking site was the fourth highest valued statement. The amenities offered at the truck parking site, including fuel, restroom access, trash, food, beverage, Wi-Fi, lighting, auxiliary power units, was the second lowest priority statement, and then whether the parking site is public or private was actually the lowest priority of the statements that we asked them. And then looking at the survey responses, how satisfied are they with the truck parking experience in the following areas? Overall, they were pretty satisfied in terms of the quality of parking experience and the overall availability compared to the others. The time it takes to find parking and the amenities of the truck parking sites were the next highest, and then parking security was the lowest satisfaction from the survey here. And then the question of how important are the following amenities to you at the truck parking sites, so it's asking about the specific amenities. Restroom access was ranked as the highest. Lighting, the space design for ease of maneuvering, the quality of the pavement and surface was actually pretty surprisingly high. Security cameras on site, perimeter fencing was still pretty high, and food beverage access was still high, but not quite as high. Trash access was high, but the lowest ones were Wi-Fi access, the auxiliary power unit hookup. So those were kind of the least valued in terms of the amenities. And then in terms of the survey responses, have they used, this was an interesting question, have you used an undesignated parking location during your last 5 days of duty? 89% had used an undesignated location within their last 5 days of duty, and only 11% had not. And the reasons were reported being the highest reason was couldn't find a suitable designated location at 42%. 33% the reason was the undesignated location was perceived as more convenient. And the next highest was other, and then with only 8%, I saw other trucks parked at the undesignated location, so I assumed it wasn't enforced. It was only 8%. So it was just interesting to try to ask them. I mean, maybe they're not going to report everything about why they might not have been abiding by the law, but it's interesting to ask the question regardless, right? So, and then looking at kind of the project timeline for this study going forward here and what's already been completed, the literature review, the designated locations inventory, data analysis has been completed. We're still kind of wrapping up, trying to get some more responses from the survey and stakeholder interviews. And then the existing conditions report will largely be an assembly of what I've already presented. due this month, and then looking at goals and objectives in next month, and then a final report by June. So there are any questions?
Any questions for Scott? None of us are truck drivers.
We respect them.
I got them in my family. Sure.
Very eye-opening.
Yeah. And that's part of the issue is when they've got a load, they've got a certain number of hours that can be on the road. If they can stop and park in your towns and cities, because they got there early, nobody's around at 3 o'clock in the morning, so they have to wait for somebody to take care of their load. So they may be parking at your local Walmart or that local area. I'm not sure you really want to restrict it too much, because the one thing that we were concerned about years ago was idling. We talked a lot about how we had alternatives with the idling.
Yeah, that's interesting. We haven't touched much yet on the air quality and idling impacts, but it hasn't been perceived as a very important thing. So.
Any other comments or questions? If not, Mr. Bradsky. We have programming fiscal year 2026. This is informational. 2026-2030 Transportation Improvement Program Administrative Modifications. Thank you.
So, good morning, everybody. Just wanted to, on page 12 of your packet, not page 59. Fortunately, the packet isn't that big this time.
Just to be clear, that's the electronically posted packet. It is on page 15.
Oh, okay. This is April, so for March, we had the administrative modification 26-22. These are only infrastructure projects, and I'm reporting that there were 18 NDOT projects and 8 projects that were local that had administrative modifications on those. I've listed the NDOT projects kind of generally because those are not in the MPO funds. So I've kind of shown the generalities of those. But if you look on page 13, you can see all the local projects, specifically in the changes that were made in the administrative modification. A project, Cedar Lake had a project increase of PE. East Chicago had a project increase of PE for purchasing zero emission vehicles, electric vehicles, in other words. Griffith had one for the same reason. Hobart, again, the purchase zero emission vehicles, increasing funding. This time of the year, I'd like to point out that I generally, as I've mentioned before, I've got the couch and I'm going through the couch cushions and finding all that loose change, and I'm trying to get rid of it before I sell the couch. Because once I sell that couch, I can't go to that couch. So, and so this is the time of the year I'm trying to use up all these extra funds that NERC may have. Munster, signal, EVP, emergency vehicle preemption, some signal upgrades, increased PE. This was not just for Munster, but this was 6 or 7 different communities, I believe, that under the Munster banner. And then NERC has increased, changed the funding. It didn't increase any funding, but changed the funding for its Green Fleets program from STPG to CMAQ because it qualifies for that. And when I say it qualifies it, we cannot just program things with CMAQ or HSIP funds. We have to go through a process at NDOT and submit our projects to NDOT. They review them, and then let us know whether or not they've been approved. So until then, until that time, everything has to be put in as STBG or TA before we can change those over to HSIP or CMAQ. So in this case, went from STBG to CMAQ. Moving on in Porter County, Willow Creek Road, we moved construction from FY 27 to 29. And then Cherville, Willow Creek, we increased the PE funding and then moved some PE funding from 28 to 26. So is there any questions on that administrative modification? Sure, sir.
Willow Creek, is that phase one?
Yes, that is phase one. So that it would be Willow Creek from 700 north to State Road 130. Moving on, it would be the emergency amendment along the same lines as the past administrative modification. NERC can, according to our public participation plan and our TIP now, NERC can do an emergency amendment for two reasons. One, either emergency as far as risk of life, or say a bridge strike or something like that, something that needs to be taken care of immediately, as well as loss of funding, federal funding. So in this case, we had programmed some funds and it needed to be put into an amendment other than administrative modification, because either, for instance, that phase of the project is not in the current TIP, or we added more than 50% is what our rules state. So most of these are because we added that phasing because that phasing wasn't in the TIP. Now, in several cases, the project already had phasing, already had funds in that phase, but it was in a prior TIP. So I had to put it in an amendment to put it in the current TIP. So again, on this one, NDOT had two projects, and we limited this only to FY 26 projects. So NDOT had two projects, and then the following local projects, we had Crown Point, Griffith, LaPorte City, LaPorte, Lake County, and Michigan City. And you can see that we've, around about a US 231, we had a PE. Griffith, we had some more PE. LaPorte County had a comprehensive and transit plan. We added more funding for PE. LaPorte County, Bridge 166 replacement, added funds for right-of-way. Lake County had the Veterans Memorial Bridge, in Michigan City, Singing Sands Trail. So we've submitted those in the end of March, and we are hoping that this emergency amendment goes through in time. There's been a delay at Federal Highway in reviewing and approving amendments, so I'm hopeful that the December amendment, which took 2 months for Federal Highway to review and approve, is just an anomaly. Because we do have a February amendment, we do have this amendment, which we put in March, that still need to go through before May 1st. May 1st is when NDOT closes their books, and that couch gets sold. And I can see David and Kelly over there licking their chops. Because after May 1st, our only options for any highway funds is to give those to transit. So, and Steven's over there licking his chops too for the subrecipients. So, are there any questions on either the emergency amendment or the administrative modification?
None that I see. You did send out a press release for yet another period for comment.
So yes, thank you for bringing that up. NERC has a May amendment which is out for public comment. So those are going to be, those projects are, it's May, so those books are already closed, so we're looking at FY27, how we're going to move things around, so on and so forth. If you have any questions, if you want to look at it, it's online, it's in RTIP, so, or I can provide you a list of projects if you would like, of what's going on in FY27.
Staff is always available and we appreciate it, so thank you, Charles.
Yep, no problem. Again, yes, like Commissioner Brzezinski mentioned, I think everybody has my phone number. If you have any questions, please give me a call. I'd be more than happy to talk to you about your projects.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Let's go on to reports from planning partners. Start with Dry Clean Indiana. Do we have anything from Dry Clean Indiana?
Oh, yes, absolutely. I'm sorry, I was going to say, are you talking to me? I'm like, hello. Okay, we're going to start out with the test.
Mr. Lissick.
So I just have a question for everyone. We were talking about trucks. Do you know what the average age of the death of an over-the-road truck driver is? Anybody? 65. 65? 72? 72? 61. And so as we talk about the health and welfare of over-the-road truck drivers, I think that's part of some of the things that we've uncovered with the study. So you all passed. So again, just to give you a quick update, I'll limit this to an hour. Okay. So we still have Tesla wall chargers available. So if you want to see what a Tesla charger looks like, look out the parking lot. Okay. So if your communities are wanting any type of Tesla chargers, please see us. So we still have 18 of those, and we have 9 pedestals. So we also have a donation from General Motors. So we have 18 level 2 chargers. So Lake LaPorte or Porter County. Moving on, I would just like to start getting you in the grant opportunity mode. There is going to be one more grant round of Indiana VW mitigation. That's pointing at Kay. So again, if your community is interested, please see us. We'd like to help you with that.
How much is that for?
Well, we've got varying numbers. It hasn't been released yet, but anywhere from $3 to $10 million. Okay, so our state has done a great job. I have to say that with that. So literally, this is money that was put in an account several years ago by the Governor Holcomb's administration, and so money that was accrued through the VW, they received interest on it. So again, and there were some rescinded projects throughout the state that we weren't involved with that are coming back. So again, these are for on-road and off-road vehicles. Could be compressed natural gas, could be electric, could be drayage trucks. So there's a lot of things. So we're expecting this to come out late in spring. So we just finalized working with NERC some EECBG grants that were due on April 5th. We submitted for Beverly Shores, Long Beach, and Michigan City, and those were for electric vehicles and electric charging stations. And we talked a little bit, Charles talked about the ZEV program. I'll have the notes, you can see those in the notes, some of the updates. But I will tell you is that through the Go EV Indiana that was updated on the 2nd of February, our truck stops that are receiving Go EV Indiana fast charging stations, they're all at the pilots. So pilots were awarded Lake Station, Hebron, and Gary. So you'll see some construction starting on those relatively soon. And then for the level 2 projects, NERC received a grant through Go EV Indiana. And again, you can see the implementation of the Tesla chargers and the installation of those. Porter County Convention Bureau, Cherville Automotive, South Shore, JLR's the Jaguar dealer, and Viking Medical Center were all awards of level 2 stations. So we will be having some updates on the National Electric Vehicle project. So that's our state received over $70 million for electric vehicles. So there's talk about that maybe moving towards all alternative fuels, but we'll keep you up to date on that. And then upcoming events. So any of your communities that are interested in training for natural gas, We are doing, with the city of Hobart, a natural gas vehicle training, so getting mechanics certified, and this will take place April 13th through the 16th. We're doing a recycling webinar with Homewood Disposal, and Homewood Disposal does a lot of trash collection throughout the region, but this is going to be about what happens to electric car batteries after they become non-usable. So that'll be something interesting to all of our communities. Porter County Earth Day is coming up, so if you haven't signed up for that, you can see many of the partners in here. That's on April 18th. We have the Crossroads, we've got several Crossroads Clean Energy webinars that we're doing across the state. And then the Northwest Indiana Partners for Clean Air event is on June 11th. And then we're also doing the Air Quality Action Day with Gary Railcats on August 2nd. Our Clean Air Golf Outing went live today, so if you're interested in Clean Air Golf Outing, this is an event that we do every year with many partners, and that will be, that's open right now. And then we are working with NERC. We're going to be hosting a Crossroads Clean Energy Technology events in November. So a lot of events going up, a lot of funding, and I would just say is that some of the things that people ask us all the time is what's going on with funding. Well, I will tell you is that we're starting to see that many national grants are starting to come out. So similar to what Tom was talking about, some of the federal funding for Clean Cities and Communities DOE EPA grants became law in January. So we're starting to see some of these federal funds starting to loosen up. So if you have a project that you're interested, please let us know. Let us be a partner and help you implement your project. So if anybody's got any questions, I'd be happy to answer. Kay, thank you for years of service. That's wonderful. So congratulations to you and Craig on your retirement.
Check with them later.
I think we might get her for one more meeting yet.
One more.
Well, I might not see her.
But
Yeah,
I wanted to take a moment to go a different route. I served on the BW Advisory Board for I don't know how many years we were in position, and I had to recuse myself from every vote on a project that was done by Clean Cities, which resolved in Clean Drive Clean.
Thanks for the shout out.
And I didn't get to vote as often as my other peeps did because Carl and his staff did a phenomenal job of representing our communities, getting good quality applications submitted to the advisory board. And I don't know what the percentage was of the overall 40 million that came to this region of the state, but it was significant. And so congratulations to you and your team for doing a really good job working with the communities.
Congratulations to all of our communities. So thank you, Kate. So that's it. Anybody have any other questions, comments? David?
Offline.
Oh, okay. Offline.
He wants that money.
I do want to thank Carl for reminding us that Earth Day is coming up.
Yes.
18th at Porter County Expo. If you're in the neighborhood, it'll be first thing in the morning. And
it's a great event. If you've never been there, it's very family oriented. Again, all of our partners are there from Northwest Indiana. So great day. It's a fun day. Learn a lot and I learn something every year, right? So but thank you all.
Okay, do we have any staff updates or announcements? Got staff here.
I just have one announcement.
Sure.
We are negotiating. We conducted an RFP for road safety audits for this year, as I kind of mentioned in the WP presentation. We did select Corey Dino again as our consultant. We're negotiating contracts with them, and we anticipate that that'll be approved by the commission this month. So we will be again conducting a call for projects, call for locations for RSAs for this year. And then as I mentioned, we'll be doing the same thing again next year for hopefully for 2 years.
Hopefully our municipalities take advantage. It's a great program.
Yeah, and I will note that this year it is 50% covered by the federal funds, so there is no local match.
Thank you.
Got a couple things.
Yeah.
Real quick. Totally coincidental, but we just literally ordered 5 alternative fuel vehicles, 3 electrics and 2 hybrids from Gillig. We're going with electrics and hybrids because it's quicker to get the electrics built actually. So we're getting 3 electrics, 2 hybrids. We've already sent them the notice to proceed. we are gonna need some additional chargers, so I wanna have a conversation with you. Okay, additionally, this just went live on our Instagram page. We've got 3 of our Cycle 219 stations that have been deployed, have bikes deployed in the last week. Cal College, downtown Gary, and downtown Lincoln, with Marquette Park to join that list. We're getting bikes put online, this evening to add to that. So, and we're also starting to get requests for new locations. So that mobility option is starting to pick up speed for this year. And I want to say that's it. Yeah, new buses and new bikes.
Thank you, David. That was enough. Do we have any other announcements?
Just real quick, I wanted to mention a week ago today, we opened the Wellness Corridor. Still some wrap-up work to do and more exciting things along the line to come, but it's open and it's running.
And 2 of the requests we've gotten for bikes have been on the last station.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Working together. The meetings coming up are, one's coming tomorrow, April 8th. It's Georgia's Committee of Economy and Place. They'll be meeting in this room at 10 a.m. tomorrow.
Everybody do that.
Leadership Committee of NERC is April 16th at 10 a.m. I'm sorry, yeah, I skipped a line here. Leadership will be at 8 a.m. And then the NERC Full Commission will be April 16th at 9 a.m. Is there anything else good for the cause? Thank you, everybody, for hanging around. It was a little bit longer than typical, but I appreciate it.
Good information.
Do we have a motion to adjourn?
Nobody was anxious.
Our next meeting will be May 5th, Tuesday, May 5th, at 10 a.m.